So in recent times, some schools have examined the area of links with the ed tech industry. One such school is Coláiste Baile in Galway, who have teamed up with the Novate Centre in order to improve the learning possibilities for the students. So the next presentation is by Lara Dabbagh and Dr. Kathy Kipp, and it'll examine the links between industry, research and schools in technology, the rewards of educational technology, among other things. So I'm going to introduce Lara first. Lara is Lara Dabbagh. I give her a round of applause. She's the assistant principal in Coláiste Baile, a post-primary school in Galway. Over the past 2 years, she, as is the case with her colleagues, has created a digital teaching and learning resource that has replaced the textbook in her classroom. And also, we have Dr. Kathy Kipp, who works for the Novate Centre as an ed tech researcher. So give Dr. Kathy Kipp a round of applause. So Kathy and Lara will take the next presentation.
Hi, how are you?
Hi there. As you just said, I'm Kathy and this is Lara, and we both answer to Miss, as we both are currently a teacher and we're a teacher. And the next slide. There you go. So, as I was saying, I work for the Novate Center as an ed tech researcher. And Novate is basically a think tank that's interested in learning innovations, that's affiliated with both Enterprise Ireland and Trinity College Dublin. And so in regards to what many of the panelists were speaking about earlier, it is a place where there is an interest in what industry is looking for, what's best practice in research, but we also bring in that third element of the schools. And so that's why we actually are presenting together, because there is a relationship that goes from industry to the schools in what we're doing.
Thank you. So we're going to kind of build on what the other panelists talked about today, because it was so well put earlier that it is the era of collaboration. So this collaboration project was even more exciting with that in mind. So I'm a teacher in a post-primary school in Galway, Coláiste Baile, and we're a new school. We opened our doors in August 2013. We're in our second year, so over the 2 year groups, we have near 400 students now. We made a conscious decision starting off that we would have no more textbooks. Instead, we were going to recreate, or we were going to curate a digital teaching and learning resource, and teachers were going to curate that content. We were going to move away from the passive model of the one-size-fits-all in the textbook, and we were now going to move to a more tailor-fit, relevant, engaging education for our students. So currently, along with my colleagues, we're collaborating to curate this teaching and learning resource where our students are actively involved in that content creation, where they're feeding into it as well. And we heard earlier the big debate around, teachers don't have time to fit these things in. And that's why it's so important that teachers have a say, and we are asked, what do we want to include in our teaching? What do we want the technology to allow us to do? And that's why this project was all the more interesting, because we could look at that and we could address that question.
So you can see why we'd be wanting to work with a school that has the one-to-one devices and the culture of technology already there. And to kind of explain everything, I want to start with just a small story that I think actually fits in with what everyone has been saying earlier, and that is from my own classroom experience. One day, a certain student, in the middle of what I thought was a fascinating lesson on the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock by T.S. Eliot, poem, raised his hand, and here I thought he was going to ask a question about what I was teaching, but as we know often happens, it was not the case. And when I called him in, I said, CJ, yeah? And he goes, and his hand hit the desk with a big boom, who decided that we need to know this? And I just kind of stood there and I froze, and he goes, because if this is one of the best poems in the world, I don't want to see the worst ones. He goes, I don't need to know this. And then he went on, and it was the last class of the day, and he went through every single class he had had that day. and talked about all the things he didn't need to know that someone else had decided that he did need to know, and where was this going to come into play in his life. And I think the frustration that a student like CJ shows is something that we're all talking about here in regards to technology in the classroom, in that who decided that this is what actually should come into the classroom? That we as teachers should be using, that this is what students should be using, or that what teachers and students actually want? And so with this partnership and working at Learnovate, what we've kind of tried to do is rethink the model of development using this question of who decides. So with where I'm working at Learnovate, we do start with an industry initiative where there are industry partners who have certain questions and agendas that they're looking at in regards to the learning space and the education space, and they're saying, can we do something over here? And so that's where it starts. In some ways, the questions that the industry members are asking are questions that we as teachers have asked ourselves, but they're coming from a different perspective. And so what I do specifically is I do research around how to take what the industry partners are looking at, the questions they're interested in, and channeling them into the classroom. How can I actually do something, we do something, all of us do something that's benefiting both industry and the schools? And so my job is to kind of go out and look and see what's going on internationally in global research in the space that is currently being talked about or interested in. And then from my teaching perspective, I make recommendations. These recommendations are on the demonstrators that we're building. And I want to talk a bit longer about this portion here, because I think this is what's really interesting in what we're doing. So Learnovate Center isn't just looking at ideas, we're actually building the things that we're researching, but we're not building products. Nothing is a finished or final design. It's not something that's ready to go to market. It's not something that's been signed off on. It's not something that basically we've kind of packaged up and said, here you go, CJ, now you need to use this in the classroom. What we're building is a demonstrator. So it's demonstrating an idea or a concept around what the industry partners are looking for and around what myself as the educational researcher has decided could possibly fill the niche. And so we build something that's not necessarily complete, and that is purposeful, and it's purposeful for many reasons, but in the context of this presentation, the reason why it's mostly purposeful is because there needs to be space for voices, the voices of the teachers and the students, to provide feedback and say, okay, so this is what you've given us, and this is what we liked, and this is what we didn't like, and this is how we would make it better. So we have two current demonstrators that have gone out into the schools. And Lara will speak more about the process within the schools and the involvement in the schools. But I think that the important thing to know is there is a conversation that's happening. Obviously, we're presenting together. We're not presenting as two individual people up here with expertise in our specific areas. There is a conversation that is happening, a small one. It's, you know, we're not doing everything for every school in Ireland, but it is a starting point based on what everybody here on the panels have been saying, where the voices are being heard. So what we do once the demonstrators get built is we hand them over to the schools, and the schools will trial them. Now, the current demonstrators we have running are two called Almanac and Skill Track. And just briefly, both have been run in Lara's school. Lara was in charge of the Almanac trial, and I'll let her talk a little bit more about that demonstrator. The Skill Track one is around 21st century skills, which the first presentation spoke to in some ways, and looking at how we can integrate these into the classroom, achieve more student literacy around the concepts of 21st century skills and key skills without having teachers have to sit down and say, today is our lesson on creativity. So looking at how you can integrate this into the regular kind of heartbeat of the classroom and trying to create something that both teachers will look at and say, oh, I'd use that, and students will look at and say, oh, I'd want to use that. And that's one of the things that we're most interested in, is that idea of wanting to use something. So then the other demonstrator that we would have had more kind of connection between myself and Laura is the one there that's labeled Almanac. So I'll let her talk about that and talk about how it's gone from industry to research to the demonstrator into the schools and back again.
Thanks. Listening to Kathy, you kind of get an insight into how delighted I was when we were approached by Kathy and Novate, because now my voice was being heard, and we put a lot of thought into what device we wanted in the school. We sat down as our management and our teachers and we thought about what device we wanted, what was going to allow us to amplify the learning, to enhance it. Now, we came up with the Surface Pro device where our students all have a digital stylus and can reap the benefits of that powerful pen. But even more important than that, we started to look at now, for the first time, I got an insight and I got to say in what do we want the industry partners to give us? What kind of software would we like to get? And as teachers, I think we've all experienced that overwhelming feeling when we're walking around exhibition halls and you meet different technicians and industry partners and they're telling you, oh, you need this in your classroom, you should use this in your classroom. And I say, oh, you're a teacher. No. And you're thinking, well, you don't really know what we're doing in the classroom. It's lovely to get that voice, and we found it so refreshing to actually, before we got to the finished product, to have my voice heard. And more importantly, we saw the benefit of having the students' voice heard. And Kathy came to the school and visited the students and sat down with my students and spoke to them about the software. What would they like for it to do? What would they like to achieve from it? And that was fantastic because we saw them more engaged in the process. We saw it increase their motivation. Almanac was the first piece of software I trialed within my class, and I'm a geography teacher. So all the information that we could ever want is out there now. Students no longer have to have all of that information now to participate, to be equipped with the skills to go out and participate in life. What they need is the skill to find it, search for it, evaluate it, and present it. So this gave us the skill where it was structured. So I, as a teacher, I could manipulate it as such, where I could give them certain things that they could go and find, and they could add it together. They could add a little piece of information and build on their knowledge, and I could get them to add on with another group, and they could create little digital magazines as such, where they could present it in different media types and videos and so on. So it got them out there in a safe world, instead of just sending them out to search on the internet where I was getting PhD standard essays on rocks coming back to me. Now it was a structured intranet where they could go out to and gather that information and evaluate it. So it was so refreshing to be asked within the classroom, what is it that you would like the technology to allow you to do? SkillTrack, the other app that we're looking at, it's an extremely exciting revolution as such, because it's looking at how do we now assess those soft skills? How do we encourage that problem solving and critical thinking and collaboration? So this was a lovely add-in, and we could look at, well, did it encourage curiosity? Did it encourage creativity among the tasks? So it really did. The major strength, I feel, of the project was not that we were coming out with these amazing projects, we were given these finished projects, but we were involved in the process, and we were empowered to put our voice, to put the students' voice into it, and then we were having a much richer piece of software at the end. And I really saw that in when Kathy came in and she sat with the students and she sat with me, and they spoke about, and they were empowered, and they saw their importance of their voice involved in that. So it was a really rich experience to be involved with.
I think to add to that, in one of the interviews that I did, when Lara sent the students down to me, there was obviously the statement of, you know, as long as you talk to her, that's as long as you'll stay out of class. And so I was a little worried about the sort of input and feedback that I would get. But the longer I talked with the students, and they were groups of 5 that I saw the students in, the more excited they became about the possibilities of taking the software that they had seen and used firsthand and improving it. And the suggestions they had weren't just about design, you know, can it do this, can it look like this, can it have this, can we personalize this, can I have my name on it, etc. the questions were, or their feedback was also in a pedagogical space as well, where they were saying, for the type of student I am and the type of learner I am, this is what I would have liked it to have looked like. This is the features I would have needed from it. And I think that that was something that we were hoping to get from the students. And I think we all know that when you actually take the time to ask students questions and then listen to their feedback, you can get the most wonderful things. But it was incredibly rich in regards to what they were saying, in the fact that when I went back into Novate to the designers and all the IT coordinators, et cetera, they were quite surprised at some of the things that the students had come up with and said, yeah, well, we didn't necessarily have the time to do that, but that's a great add-on, or that's a great idea. And some of the suggestions the students were making were also very applicable to corporate spaces, not just school spaces. So they had kind of ticked boxes that we hadn't even thought about in regards to where the technology could go. I think the other thing that was beneficial as well was just the dialogue that we had as classroom teacher, former teacher, current researcher, around the ways in which it could have been used in the classroom. I think that we had gone in kind of saying to Laura, this is how you should use it, and the way in which you ended up using it was completely different, and I actually perhaps used the software a bit better.
Well, I just like to say again, it really is the era of collaboration, and we are at a time now where we are going to see amazing results if we work together, if we empower the teachers out there, because there is fantastic innovation going on in the classrooms around the country, and we are small enough that we can have that collaboration link. We can work with industry, and we can see amazing results, because and it was so articulately put from Hannah in the panel earlier, it shouldn't be something as teachers that we need to fit into certain areas. It shouldn't exist totally on its own. It should be something that we can build in, and we can equip students with the skills to go out there and participate in the world. The essence of education has not changed. We are still equipping students with the skills needed to be successful, but society has changed. That world that we're sending our students out to has changed, and I feel like we could achieve so much through collaboration.
I think then to return to the screen and to return to kind of the idea of CJ and who decides what we need to know. If education is going to change, if the educational space is going to shift, this is a model that actually has great potential, where the people who are deciding on things are the students and the teachers, and then industry and technology are responding to those needs, to those wants even in the classroom, and that there is a partnership that comes together, so there is a sense of I'm being listened to, not just from the teacher's side of things, but also from the student's side of things. And I think the other thing that goes through this that we all know with technology is you can create one version, and in the span of a year, it might be obsolete. And so I think the thing as well in regards to this kind of partnership model and this way of looking at how to develop technology for the future and for the future classroom is about that continuing cycle of revisiting the student voice, revisiting the teacher voice. Because the other thing is as well is the students change every year. We don't teach content, we don't teach curriculum. We teach students and we teach lives. And so we need to respond to the current people in the classroom and not the ones who had passed through 2, 3, 4 years previously.
So when we were looking at this, we saw the quote, Piaget's quote, "The principal goal of education is to create men and women who are capable of doing new things, not simply repeating what other generations have done." And this was definitely true when it was written, but it is more true than ever today. And we are in that era of creation, and a large proportion of our students going out there are going to work in jobs that have not been created yet. We have no idea. We heard it earlier, it's even happening where some of our panelists are now working for companies like Facebook and so on that didn't exist. So we can choose to be daunted and to be scared by that, or we can embrace it and embrace the opportunities that are going to come in the future.
And just to kind of add my own last note to that, I think it's all about remembering that there isn't just one person in the classroom. It isn't the student, it isn't the teacher, it isn't the technology. It's everyone working together to create a future that supports all of us.